Hi. So this supplemental activity is to teach you about drop-down lists. There are two kinds of drop-down lists in Access. One is for tables and the other is for forms. You'll learn about the one for forms. Okay. So in this supplemental activity, you're going to learn about what drop-down lists are and then how to create them in tables. Again, you'll learn about doing forms later on. The purpose of drop-down lists is to increase data integrity, and you will understand what I mean more in a moment. So a drop-down list looks like this. Here is an example where you've got a field that's state, and you can click on the arrow and it'll give you a list of states. So to give you a live action view of what a drop-down list is, here is an example right here, drop-down list. So it has two columns, and the user can come and pick the item that they want, and one of the items from the row that the user picks will be recorded into the field. Now, you can set it up to have multiple columns or only one column. In this case, there are two columns. You can have 3, 4, 5 columns, and one of those items in the row that the user picks will be recorded into the field. So the purpose behind drop-down lists is to increase data integrity. What do I mean by that? It means the correctness of your data, that you can rely on it being correct. So drop-down lists are very useful for that because it limits, the designer can limit the possible options that would go or be recorded into a field. And that can be very, very useful because, for example, if you're trying to summarize data, maybe based on state, for example, you need to have all of the values entered into that state field to be consistent. And so that if they enter CO for Colorado in one place, but Colorado, the full word, in another place, then they're not going to be consistently entered. And so when you go to do counts, there will be counts for CO and counts for Colorado spelled out, and maybe you might put COLO, and there would be a count for that, for example. So consistent data entry is really important. So drop-down lists have properties that you set up in order to make the drop-down list work correctly, okay, so that you can have a situation like this. So what you're doing is you're going to go in and set properties associated with this particular field, or a particular field that you want to drop down list. So the properties in the table design look like this right here. And so what you would do is you would click on lookup, and then there would be text box here, but you would change that to combo box. And then from there you would set these properties. And here is a list of the properties and their descriptions, and I tried to describe what they are. So I'll go over them. Row source type, you would either have table/query, or you would have value list. If you have table/query as the option picked, then for row source, you would indicate the table or query that would be the source of your list. So for this example, we have state, and down here we have a whole bunch of properties, and we have a row source type of table/query, and the row source is this table here, which you can see exists over here as a table in the navigation pane. So in general, and for your final project, you mostly want to, well, almost always will you use table/query because you want to be able to easily update that list. You want the user to be able to update it without the designer having to go in and change the list all the time. If you have value lists, then you're hard coding the list into the table, and then you, the designer, have to go in and change that list. Whereas if you use table/query, you can set it up so that the user can just go add items to the list. And the only, there are some exceptions with wherein you would use value lists. For example, if you're wanting to put the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, those aren't going to change. So then it would be reasonable for you to use value list, okay? But I will be looking for that on the final project, so keep that in mind. So I've gone over here. You can also have an SQL statement for your row source, which is really another way of expressing a query, which you'll learn later on in the semester. Okay. The next property is bound column, and this is the column in your list where the data will be pulled in the list and actually recorded. What do I mean by that? So let's go back over here, and I say bound column 1. So if you come here, you'll see that there are 2 columns, 1 and 2. And when it says bound column 1, then that means it will record the value from column 1, this column. Now if I said bound column 2, then it would record this value. Next is column count. That is the number of columns that you're going to have in your list, that you want to have show in your list. So right here it says column count 2. It says we want 2, and you remember that when we go into our list and you actually click the arrow to see the list, there are 2 columns. There's like the abbreviation, and then there's the actual name of the state. Next is column heads, and that's just if you want at the top of your list to have the name of the field showing. So I will show you what I mean by that. So right now column heads is set to no. So if we go into datasheet view, okay, and we come here and we click down, there's no heading that shows what these columns are. And it's a designer decision always as to whether you think that it's appropriate or not to have a column heading. So I'll demonstrate what it looks like when you do have a column heading. Right, so I changed it to yes, okay, and so I click down and you see it says abbrev and then it says state. So that's the column headings. Those are column headings. Next is column widths, and basically that's how wide your listed columns are in inches, sort of inches, access inches anyway. So, so you're going to identify how wide this column will be and how wide that column will be. And I will show you what that looks like. So here's 0.75 and then double quote, which means inches, semicolon, 1.25, and then double quote. It means again meaning inches. And so this is how wide the first column is, and this is how wide the second column is, and you'll notice that they're not the same width. Okay? So list rows just means the number of rows that would show up when you, the limit of the number of rows that would show up in a list. So I'll show you that. So this says list rows 10, okay? And so if we go into datasheet view, I'll show you that. So right here, there's a list, and what that means is that there would be a limit of 10 rows. So if I have more than 10 items in my list, then you'd have to use the scroll bar, okay? But it only shows 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ooh, 10. Well, anyway, close to 10. It's supposed to show 10, but I think it's because it considers this column headings a row as well. So anyway, you could change this to 20, but you want a reasonable amount. And you don't want to just limit it to like 2 or 3. You want it to be a reasonable number. The default that Access has is 16. You don't need it to be that big, but you can just let it default to that too. One less thing to worry about. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the list of properties here. List width, okay? Notice there's column widths and then there's list widths, okay? So column widths is different than list width because column widths you have individual widths for each column. List width is the entire list, how wide it is. So there is an auto, which means then the list will be as wide as the field is. The problem with that is that if the field is if your field width is too narrow and you have it set to auto, then it'll just cut off your list and the user won't be able to see everything in the list. So here I set the list width to auto. Okay. Now watch what happens when I click the down arrow. See, it cuts it off. You can't see it. So it's better to set a width that is wide enough that the user can actually see all the items in the list, or to just add up the column widths and put in the total value there. So for example, we have column widths of 0.75 inches and 1.25 inches. And for the list width, you could just put in 2 because that's what these two add up to be 2. So that's one way to handle it. And then when you do that, then it will actually be wide enough. Okay, almost out of properties. Limit to list, last one. And this, here it is, see, limit to list. So limit to list is really a useful property because you can say to the user, or say the user cannot pick anything except for what's in the list. And so if you set this to yes, then you're saying yes, the user cannot pick anything else except for what's in the list. If you say no, then the user can pick anything that's in the list or enter anything that they would like to enter. And, you know, when you're a designer, many times you do want to definitely say, these are the choices and there are no other choices. But in other times, you want to say, these are the choices and but the user can enter other choices. It depends on your particular situation. And yeah, and you just have to think about the situation that you are developing for, you know, what your goal is. So I'm going to put this video in here, and I'm going to, what I'm going to tell you is that I'm going to go ahead and go through this again with the student context table. And I'm just going to go through, and you can read through this. This is how you would do these things. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do it more quickly, and I'm going to set it with these property settings so that you can see what it looks like. So in this example, the row sort. So okay, first of all, we're going to do another drop-down list for state in the student contacts table. Okay, and I'm going to first come here to lookup. I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to combo box, and then it says that we want the row source to be table/query, and that's what's defaulted. Okay, and then the row source is drop down states, which I'll just click here and I'll go and I'll put down drop down states, and then it says bound column 1. So I've got bound column 1. It says column count of 2, so we'll say 2. Okay, column heads, I'm going to put yes because it says to put yes, and then the widths 0.75 semicolon 1.5. It'll insert the quotes to indicate inches, and I'll put in 10 rows. The list width, I'll put in 2.25, and I'll say yes for limit to list. Okay, so yes, I want to limit it to the items in the list. I want the width to be 2.25, which is the total of these two items. I'm going to have 10 items in my list. I am going to show the headings. I'm going to have 2 columns, and I've got the widths indicated for those. Bound column 1, drop down state, or yeah, drop down states is my table. So if I go here, so if I'll bring this over here to the center, okay, and make this a little bit bigger, and we'll see that now we have it all set up with column headings, 2 columns, the widths of the columns. Yep, okay. So hopefully that's all clear to you. So now you've seen how to create drop-down lists for tables, and there's a bunch of questions here you can go through and do. And one thing that I want to tell you is that you're going to create a drop-down list for the books table right here, this books table right here. And I will tell you, do not use the field state in the books table to do for your example. So you can create a drop-down list about any of these guys here, except no making a drop-down list for state. I already showed you how to do that. You got to come up with a different different example. Okay, and so I just want to make sure I draw your attention to that. And so anyway, and you'll just write in here your responses. And at the end, you'll write up a summary of what you did. Make sure that you hand your database into SA10 drop-down list assignment folder. And don't forget to click on submit. Okay, so that's it. All right, thanks.